"I cannot fail you, my little ones," Alaric whispered, as the biting wind howled through the gaps of the ruined castle, and the faint cry of the baby, feverish in his arms, echoed the pain in his blind heart. He fumbled along the cold floor, each step uncertain, feeling despair tighten its grip, but the memory of the promise he had made to his late wife and lost son spurred him on. His eyes, which could not see the world's darkness, sought an inner light, an intuition that would lead him to salvation, for something within those old stones cried out to be found. Alaric pressed the small body against his chest, the child's faint warmth the only flame amidst the icy desolation. His other grandson, Elian, perhaps 5 years old, huddled beside him, the tremor not just from the cold, but from fear visible on his pale face. "Grandpa, what are we going to do? The baby is so hot." Elian's voice was an almost inaudible thread, yet laden with an anguish that pierced Alaric deeper than any blade. Alaric felt Elian's small shoulder and pulled him closer, a protective gesture that he knew barely scratched the surface of his own helplessness. He could not see the terror in the boy's eyes, but he could feel it, a cold wave adding to the castle's chill. "Don't worry, my brave Elian." Alaric tried to sound firmer than he felt, his voice hoarse with exhaustion and anxiety. "We will find something. There is always a way." But where? Every room he had explored with his hands, every wall he had felt, seemed to offer only more ruins. More dust, more the memory of what once was, and what no longer was. The castle, once majestic, was now a tomb of hopes, an echo of a life stolen from them. The baby's crying intensified, a sharp wail tearing through the heavy silence. Alaric felt the cold sweat on the little one's forehead, and his heart tightened with a searing pain. The promise to his son, to his grandson, to himself, weighed like a rock on his soul. He had sworn to protect them, and now, with one of them on the brink of death, he felt he was failing miserably. "Grandpa, I feel a strange wind," Elian murmured, tugging at Alaric's sleeve. "It's coming from behind that wall, near the broken fireplace." Alaric turned his head, his keen hearing picking up what his eyes could not. A whisper of air, different from the general howl of the wind sweeping through the castle, a more concentrated, colder draught, which seemed to come from a specific point. He moved, guided by Elian's voice and the sensation, the baby still nestled in one arm, the other outstretched, feeling his way. The stones beneath his feet were uneven, covered in moss and debris. He reached the collapsed fireplace, feeling the roughness of the cold stones and the smell of ancient soot. The draught was unmistakable now, an icy breath that seemed to come from within the masonry itself. He ran his hands over the surface, feeling the cracks, the indentations, the holes where the mortar had given way. There was something different there, an area that felt less solid, more hollow than the rest of the wall. Elian, with his childlike curiosity and fear momentarily forgotten by the discovery, pointed with a trembling finger. "Here, Grandpa. The wind is stronger here." Alaric nodded, his brow furrowed in concentration. He pushed, felt around, sensed a slight movement. A piece of stone came loose, revealing a dark crevice. The draught grew more intense, bringing with it a smell of damp earth and something more. Something fresh, almost mineral. A faint yet powerful hope ignited in Alaric's chest. He could feel, almost see, a path opening, a possibility where before there had only been darkness. With renewed effort, he began to push the loose stones, feeling the urgency of time and the promise of a miracle. Each stone removed was a small triumph against despair, a step towards the unknown, yet promising new life. Alaric, with the baby nestled in his left arm, used his right hand and shoulder to push the stones that seemed to give way. Each movement was a groan of effort he tried to stifle, not wanting to alarm Elian further. The smell of damp earth and minerals intensified, promising something more than just a dark tunnel. Hope, once a faint thread, now coiled in his chest. giving him a strength he didn't know he possessed. The stones, heavy and cold, scraped his aged hands, but the physical pain was insignificant compared to the anguish of watching his youngest grandson waste away. Elian, wide-eyed in the gloom, watched his grandfather's every move. He saw sweat trickle down Alaric's wrinkled forehead, the way the muscles in his arm trembled beneath the worn fabric. "Grandpa, be careful," he whispered, as a larger stone shifted with a dull thud, opening the crevice a little wider. The cold, damp air now blew more strongly, and the sound of a soft, almost musical dripping began to be audible, muffled but present. Alaric felt the sound, a melody of life amidst the ruined silence. "It's water, Elian. I feel it. I hear it." His voice was choked with emotion. He pushed with all his soul, thinking of the promise, of his son's face, of his wife's memory. It wasn't just for him, but for these two small hearts that depended on him. The wall finally gave way, revealing a narrow, dark opening, from which the scent of freshness was intoxicating, and the dripping of water, now clearer, sounded like a hymn of hope. Cautiously, Alaric felt the entrance, making sure it was safe. The air inside was purer, fresher than anywhere else in the castle. "Come, my little one," he said to Elian, extending his free hand to the boy. Elian clung to his grandfather's hand, fear still present but overcome by curiosity and the promise of something new. Together, they entered the dark passage, Alaric guided by the sound of water and the feel of the air. The passage was short but pitch black. Alaric felt the damp, cold walls beneath his fingers, the floor uneven but not dangerous. The baby's crying had diminished to a faint whimper, almost a sigh, which made Alaric's heart clench even tighter. He needed to be quick. Suddenly, the darkness gave way to a clearing, and the sound of water became a constant murmur. Alaric felt ahead, and his fingers found a smooth, cold surface. It was a stone basin, and from it emanated a constant flow of water. He dipped his hand, feeling the icy and incredibly pure water. A spring of healing waters, as the legends told. The promise of the premise was coming true. He brought his wet hand to the baby's forehead, feeling the feverish heat diminish slightly, almost imperceptibly, but enough to ignite a flame of faith in his chest. Elian, though in the darkness, could feel the change in the atmosphere, the coolness, the hope radiating from his grandfather. "Grandpa, what is this?" he asked, his voice a little stronger. Alaric knelt with difficulty, the baby still in his arms, and with his other hand scooped up some water. "It is life, my Elian," he replied, his voice choked with emotion, warm tears streaming down his blind cheeks. "It is our salvation." He moistened the baby's parched lips with the water, praying it was the miracle they so desperately needed. The fever seemed to recede, a subtle but real relief, flooding Alaric's heart with deep and overwhelming gratitude. He knew this was just the beginning, but the darkness that enveloped him had for an instant been dispelled by the light of hope and a new breath of life. Alaric continued to moisten the baby's forehead, each drop a balm for his weary soul. The small body, once so hot and tense, gradually relaxed in his arms. The whimpers ceased, replaced by softer, though still weak, breathing. Elian, watching with a mixture of fascination and relief, drew even closer. "Grandpa, he's getting better," the boy whispered, his eyes fixed on his little brother. Alaric nodded, a trembling smile on his lips. "Yes, my dear, the water is helping us." He felt the coolness of the baby's skin, the decrease in feverish heat, and a wave of gratitude so intense it almost overwhelmed him. It was a miracle, an answer to his most desperate prayers. He remained there for a long time, the baby asleep and peaceful, Elian nestled beside him. The cave's silence broken only by the soft dripping of the spring. The darkness was still total for his eyes, but the light of hope shone brighter than ever in his heart. With the baby now more stable, Alaric felt a new urge to explore that small refuge. He needed to understand where they were, if there was more than just the spring. Carefully he stood up, the baby still secure in one arm. With his free hand he began to feel the chamber walls, sensing the damp, cold rock. Elian, with his keen eyesight, became his eyes. "Grandpa, the wall here is different. It has strange marks, like drawings." Alaric moved in the direction indicated by his grandson, his fingers finding grooves and reliefs on the smooth stone. They weren't mere drawings. They looked like ancient symbols, perhaps letters of a forgotten alphabet. He ran his fingers over them, feeling the history that seemed to emanate from those stones. His fingers then brushed against an indentation, a small niche hidden in the wall, disguised by darkness and dampness. Inside it, there was something rectangular, wrapped in a fabric that looked like aged leather. With his heart pounding, Alaric pulled out the object. It was a book, or perhaps a diary, heavy and ancient. The smell of old paper and mold, mixed with the mineral freshness of the cave, filled his nostrils. "What is it, Grandpa?" Elian asked, his voice full of curiosity. Alaric felt the rough texture of the leather, the rusted metal clasps. "I don't know, my little one, but it seems important." He tried to open the diary, but the clasps were stuck. Emotion overwhelmed him. It could be a clue, an answer to the questions that had tormented him since they were driven from their lands. It could be the key to the boy's future, the promise of a justice he had lost hope of finding. He sat down again near the spring, the diary on his lap, the baby breathing calmly. That mysterious object, found in such an unexpected place, seemed like a gift from fate. He felt a deep connection to the past, to the generations that might have inhabited that castle before them. Who had hidden it there? What secrets did it hold? With each touch, Alaric felt the urgency to unravel its mysteries. Hope, which was once just a thread, now wove itself into a cloak of possibilities, enveloping him and the boys in a warmth that went beyond the physical. He knew the journey was far from over, but now, with the baby's life saved and this new enigma in his hands, Alaric felt they had a purpose, a path to follow, guided not only by survival, but by the rediscovery of their own history and honor. Alaric felt the weight of the diary in his hands, an object that seemed to carry centuries of stories. The metal clasps, corroded by time and dampness, were firmly stuck, resisting his efforts. He felt the edges, sensing the roughness of the aged leather, the seams that were once strong and now frayed in places. The smell of ancient paper mixed with mold and the mineral freshness of the cave was an irresistible invitation to an unknown past. Elian, with his childlike curiosity sharpened, drew closer, wide-eyed in the gloom. "Grandpa, what's inside?" Elian asked, his voice a whisper of anticipation. Alaric tried to force one of the clasps with his thumb, but it wouldn't budge. Frustration, a familiar feeling, threatened to creep in, but the new hope the spring had brought prevented him from giving up. "I don't know, my little one, but we will find out." He turned the diary over, feeling the texture of the cover, looking for a way to open it without damaging it. His calloused, aged fingers were sensitive enough to perceive every detail. The baby, warmed and nourished by the miraculous water, breathed softly in his lap, a silent reminder of the urgency and importance of that moment. Alaric felt one of the clasps, which seemed looser than the other. He applied careful pressure, twisting it from side to side. A metallic creak, almost imperceptible, broke the cave's silence. Elian let out a small gasp of surprise. "Grandpa, it moved!" the boy exclaimed, pointing to the clasp. Alaric nodded, a bead of sweat trickling down his temple. He continued with patience and determination until, with a soft click, the first clasp came undone. Alaric's heart leaped. He repeated the process with the second clasp, which proved more stubborn, but finally yielded with a groan of rusted metal. With the clasps open, Alaric felt the diary's cover loosen. He opened it with reverence, the smell of ancient paper intensifying. His fingers felt the first pages, sensing their thin, brittle texture. There was no way he could read, but Elian was there. His young, curious eyes would be his guide. "Elian, my dear, can you see anything, any drawing, any letter?" Elian leaned in, his eyes fixed on the pages. "Yes, Grandpa, there are some drawings and some big letters, different from the ones I know." The boy's voice was a mixture of fascination and confusion. "It looks like a coat of arms, Grandpa. A lion with a crown and a sword." Alaric felt a shiver run down his spine. A lion with a crown and a sword. It was his own family's crest, the symbol he had seen engraved on rings and tapestries in his youth before darkness took his eyes and misfortune struck them. That crest, which he thought had been forever stained, now appeared there, in such an unexpected place. "It's our family's crest, Elian," Alaric whispered, his voice choked with emotion. Warm tears streamed down his face again, but this time they were not of despair, but of renewed hope, of a deep connection to his roots. "Continue, my son. What else do you see?" With each of Elian's words, Alaric felt he was not just opening a book, but unraveling a forgotten chapter of his own history, a lost link that could restore all that had been taken from them. That diary was more than a treasure. It was the promise of a truth that would set his family free. Elian, his eyes fixed on the yellowed, brittle pages, began to describe what he saw, his childlike voice taking on a tone of admiration and surprise. "Grandpa, after the crest, there's some writing. It's old, but I can make out a few words. The legacy of Eldoria. And there's a drawing of a queen with a very bright crown, and beside her a king with a serious and noble countenance. And they have the same lion on their shield, Grandpa, just like you said." The boy's voice trembled slightly with the excitement of the discovery, and he pointed to the figures with a tiny finger, as if wishing Alaric could see them too. Alaric felt a chill down his spine, a shiver that ran through his entire body. Eldoria. It was a name he had heard in legends from his childhood. An ancient kingdom said to have vanished centuries ago, swallowed by time and betrayal. Could it be true? Could his family have such a deep connection to history? "Continue, Elian, my son. Read everything you can. Describe every detail," Alaric urged, his voice almost a whisper laden with contained urgency. He pressed the sleeping baby against his chest, feeling the little one's soft breath against his body, an anchor in the storm of revelations that was unfolding. Elian, sensing the immense importance of the moment, carefully ran his fingers over the page, as if fearing the words might crumble. Here it says, "To the descendants of Alaric the Just, guardians of the eternal flame and the spring of life. This diary reveals the truth about our lineage, which was stolen and hidden by those who coveted our power. Our ancestors, the true rulers of Eldoria, were betrayed by their own counselors. The castle, which today seems like ruins and oblivion, holds not only the spring that heals and purifies, but also the treasure that will restore our honor, our lineage, and our rightful power." Alaric choked on his own saliva, his mind spinning in a dizzying rush of information. Alaric the Just. It was a legendary name, a distant ancestor, famous for his wisdom, righteousness, and courage. The eternal flame, the spring of life. Everything fit together in an astonishing way. They were not mere outcasts stripped of their lands and dignity. They were heirs to a kingdom, to an honor that had been cruelly usurped from them. The injustice he had felt for years, the shame of his blindness and exile, the pain of losing his son, and the vulnerability of his grandsons, all began to transform into a silent fury, but also an unwavering determination. His fists clenched slightly, and a strength he thought he had long lost began to bubble in his chest. "Where is the treasure, Elian? Does the diary say where it's hidden?" Alaric asked, his voice firmer now, laden with a new and powerful urgency. Elian turned a few pages with surprising delicacy for his age, his eyes scanning the illustrations and text. "Here's another drawing, Grandpa. It looks like a hand-drawn map with some symbols and a riddle. Where the sunlight kisses the oldest stone at midday, and the whisper of the wind meets the echo of the past, there rests what was lost and shall be found." Alaric closed his eyes, even though it made no difference to his sight, and tried to visualize the castle, the ruins he had traversed and felt for days, the oldest stone, the midday sun, the collapsed fireplace. It was there that the sun hit at certain times of the day, and the wind howled strongest. The secret passage they had found, the healing spring. Everything was intrinsically connected. The treasure wouldn't be far. He felt it with every fiber of his being. Elian continued to read, his childlike voice bringing the ancient words to life, revealing more and more. "The diary speaks of a secret compartment, Grandpa. Not behind the collapsed fireplace, but in the main fireplace of the great throne hall, the one with the carved gargoyles. There, beneath the family crest, is a hidden lever that reveals the path to the Crypt of Kings, where the treasure is kept. The diary also details the true lineage, explaining that Alaric's family was dethroned and expelled by traitors who seized the kingdom, and that the castle was, in fact, the secret stronghold of the true heirs, kept hidden for generations." Alaric felt a lump in his throat, tears returning, but this time they were tears of a liberating truth. His family was not merely noble, it was royalty, the true rulers of Eldoria. The expulsion, the blindness, the death of his son, everything seemed part of a larger plot, a curse that could now be broken. He hugged Elian tightly, the baby still sleeping peacefully in his lap, a symbol of life reborn. "Elian, my brave one, you are the key. You are my eyes, my guide. Together we will restore our honor. We will find this treasure and prove to the world who we truly are." Alaric's voice was choked, but full of a new and unwavering strength, a promise of justice that echoed through the cave walls, filling the space with the hope of a worthy future. The connection to the past, to the royal lineage, was a burden, but also a blessing, a purpose that transcended life itself. They were no longer lost. They were about to claim their destiny, guided by a truth that had been denied to them for so long. Alaric's voice, choked with emotion, echoed through the cave walls, filling the space with the promise of a worthy future. He squeezed Elian in a tight embrace, feeling the warmth of his grandson's small body, a living reminder of the reason for his struggle. The baby, still asleep in his lap, breathed softly, the fever finally subsiding. That diary was not just a map to a treasure, it was a mirror to his family's soul, revealing a lineage of kings and queens, of justice and sacrifice. The truth, so long hidden, now shone brightly, and Alaric felt that the darkness of his blindness and exile began to dissipate, replaced by a clarity of purpose he hadn't felt in years. "Elian, my brave one, continue," Alaric urged, his voice now calmer, but with renewed intensity. "What else does the diary reveal about the path to the treasure? Are there more details about the lever, about the crypt?" Elian, his mind teeming with images of kings and queens, of treasures and secrets, turned the page carefully. His young, keen eyes scanned the yellowed parchment, searching for the next clues. But instead of a more detailed map or direct instructions, the boy hesitated. "Grandpa," he began, his voice a little confused. "There's nothing more about the treasure here. There's a different drawing. And very small, almost faded writing. It looks like someone else's handwriting, not the same as the rest of the diary." Alaric felt a shiver. Different handwriting? He reached out, feeling the page beneath Elian's fingers. He felt the roughness of the paper, but could not discern what his grandson saw. "Describe it, Elian. What do you see?" "It's a drawing of a very old tree, Grandpa, with deep roots, and beside it a person on their knees, not looking like a king or queen, but someone simple with hands outstretched to the sky. And the writing, it's like a personal message. Let me try to read it." Elian leaned closer to the page, straining to decipher the faded words. It says, "To my descendant who finds this diary, the true wealth of Eldoria does not lie in gold or jewels, but in strength of spirit, compassion for the weakest, and justice for all. Material treasure is merely a symbol. The true crown is earned by serving the people, protecting the land, and honoring the memory of those who came before. Seek not power for power's sake, but for the ability to do good. The eternal flame we guard is the fire of hope and goodness that must burn in every heart of our lineage. If you are worthy, the treasure will reveal itself not only in gold, but in the peace you will find in fulfilling your true purpose." A heavy silence fell over the cave, broken only by the soft dripping of the spring. Alaric felt the words of his ancestor, Alaric the Just, penetrate deep into his soul. It was not just a message, it was a turning point, a reorientation of his own mission. He had sought the treasure to restore honor and ensure a prosperous future for the boys. Yes, but there had been an echo of vengeance and material restitution in his thoughts. Now, his ancestors' words reminded him that true royalty was not about what one possessed, but about what one was. He squeezed Elian again, a lump in his throat. "He is right, my son," Alaric whispered. Warm tears streaming again, but now they were tears of deeper understanding. It's not just about the gold, it's about the legacy, about the responsibility that comes with it. It's about being worthy of the name we carry. The baby's fever, the expulsion, the blindness. All of it had clouded his judgment, but now a new light, a light of altruistic purpose, illuminated his path. The quest for the treasure was no longer just a matter of survival or vengeance, but of honoring a greater promise, of restoring not just the wealth, but the soul of his family, so that they could truly be the guardians of the eternal flame. They would go to the throne hall, but with a different heart, a renewed spirit, ready to face not only external challenges, but also the responsibility of their own destiny. Alaric felt the weight of responsibility and hope. With the baby still nestled, he rose from the edge of the spring. The miraculous water had saved the little one, and the ancestors' words had healed his soul. Elian, his small hand firm in Alaric's, looked up at his grandfather. "Grandpa, are we going to find the treasure now?" the boy asked. His voice a whisper. Alaric smiled, a smile that reached his blind eyes. "Yes, my brave one, but not just the gold. We will restore our family's honor, as Alaric the Just taught us." He felt a warmth in his chest, a strength that was not merely physical. The journey back through the secret passage would be a challenge, but they had a purpose. Guided by Elian, who described each curve of the rock, Alaric began to move. The darkness was total, but his sharpened perception and trust in his grandson were his beacons. He felt the damp, cold air of the cave, the echo of his footsteps, the dripping of the spring left behind. The baby, with his regular breathing, was a constant reminder of life reborn. The passage, once frightening, now seemed a path to destiny. Elian pointed to the cracks where the faint light of the castle filtered through. "Grandpa, we're close. I can see the light from the collapsed fireplace." The boy's voice was full of enthusiasm. Alaric felt the air change, becoming drier and dustier, with the smell of ancient stone. With a combined effort, they emerged from the secret passage back into the great ruined hall. The collapsed fireplace, once a symbol of misfortune, was now a doorway to a new beginning. The morning sun, peeking through the ceiling cracks, painted the dusty floor with golden stripes, illuminating the path to the throne hall. Alaric paused, adjusting the baby. He felt the cold stone beneath his feet, the vastness of the hall echoing. "Elian, my guide, we need to go to the great throne hall. The diary speaks of the main fireplace, the one with the gargoyles." He felt the urgency, but also a calm, a certainty. The walk through the ruined castle was slow and full of obstacles. Alaric felt along the walls, his other hand holding the baby. Elian, always ahead, described the rubble, the holes, the hanging doors. "Careful, Grandpa, loose stone." Now, to the right, a large archway. With each step, Alaric felt the castle's history, the silent voices of generations. He imagined the grandeur of that place, now in ruins, but about to be rediscovered. The main fireplace of the throne hall was the next point. He vaguely remembered it from his youth, an imposing structure adorned with grotesque gargoyles, and above them his family's crest, the crowned lion with the sword. Finally, Elian exclaimed, his voice full of admiration, "Grandpa, we're here. It's enormous. And the gargoyles, they seem to be watching us." Alaric felt the imposing presence of the fireplace. The warmth emanating from it, even without fire, was almost palpable, an ancient energy. He reached out, his fingers feeling the cold, carved stone. He felt the rough shapes of the gargoyles, the stone worn by time. His fingers moved upwards, searching for the crest. "Where is the crest, Elian?" Alaric asked, his voice low and concentrated. "The diary says the lever is beneath it." Elian pointed. "Here, Grandpa, the lion with the crown and the sword. It's beautiful." Alaric moved his fingers carefully over the crest, feeling every detail of the carving. His ancestors' promise echoed in his mind, not for gold, but for honor and purpose. He knew the true journey was just beginning, and that each touch of the stone was a step towards his family's destiny. He needed to find that lever. Alaric moved his fingers with almost supernatural precision over the carved crest. Every indentation, every protrusion of the cold, ancient stone was explored with the patience of one searching for a long-lost truth. The crowned lion, with its raised sword, seemed to come alive under his touch, a silent guardian of ancestral secrets. Elian, with the baby still asleep and secure in his grandfather's lap, watched every movement, his eyes fixed on Alaric's hand. "Grandpa, what are you looking for?" the boy asked, his voice a whisper broken by the vastness of the hall. "The lever, my little one. The diary said it's beneath the crest. It must be something that moves, that yields to pressure." Alaric explained, his brow furrowed in concentration. He felt the texture of the stone, the fine dust that covered centuries of oblivion. His fingers slid over the lion's mane, over the blade of the sword, searching for any irregularity, any crack that might indicate the mechanism. Frustration threatened to surface, but the image of the baby, the promise of a worthy future, spurred him on. "Do you see anything different, Elian? Any part of the crest that looks looser or has a distinct color?" Elian leaned in, his young, keen vision scanning the stone. "There's a part, Grandpa, right at the base of the sword. It looks like the stone there is a little darker, and there's a thin, almost invisible line separating it from the rest. It's a small square." The boy pointed, his voice full of excitement. Alaric directed his fingers to the spot indicated by Elian. He felt the change in texture, the line his grandson had described. It was almost imperceptible to the touch, but it was there. He applied gentle pressure, then a little stronger. Nothing. He tried to push, to twist. Silence. "Are you sure, Elian? It doesn't seem to move." "Yes, Grandpa, it's there. Try pushing it upwards, maybe," Elian suggested, his childlike curiosity transforming into a detective's instinct. Alaric followed the suggestion. With his thumb, he pushed the small stone piece upwards, applying all his strength. A deep, grave creak echoed through the hall, a sound that seemed to come from the earth's bowels. The fireplace, which had once seemed a solid structure, began to move. Slowly, with a groan of stone on stone, a section of the wall beside the fireplace rotated inward, revealing an even denser darkness and a narrow corridor. The air coming from there was cold and stagnant, laden with the smell of damp earth and centuries of silence. Elian let out a muffled cry of surprise, his eyes wide. "Grandpa, it opened! It's a passage!" Alaric felt the icy air touch his face, irrefutable proof that they had found the way. A mixture of apprehension and triumph filled his chest. The crypt of kings, the treasure, but more than that, the truth. "It's the crypt, Elian." The diary was right. He pressed the baby against him, feeling the small, warm body. Elian's hand sought his, and Alaric held it firmly, conveying confidence. "We are about to discover what was taken from us, my son. But remember our ancestors' words. True wealth is not gold, but purpose." The darkness of the corridor seemed to swallow them, but Alaric did not hesitate. Guided by Elian's hand and the faint light coming from the opening, they took the first step into the crypt. Each step echoed, amplified by the sepulchral silence of the place. The smell of mold and ancient stone intensified, mixed with an almost metallic aroma. Elian, though a little scared, continued to describe. "It's a long corridor, Grandpa, and there are unlit torches on the walls. And some statues. They look like knights in ancient armor." Alaric felt one of the statues as he passed, sensing the coldness of the carved stone, the detail of armor that once protected an ancestor. He imagined the kings and queens of Eldoria, whose spirits perhaps still lingered there. With each step, the feeling of being in a sacred place, a sanctuary of his lineage, deepened. The treasure was not just material, it was the history, the memory, the legacy that awaited them. At the end of the corridor, Elian pointed. "Grandpa, there's a big room, and in the middle, there's a chest and some shiny things." Alaric felt his heart quicken. The chest, the treasure. But his focus was on the diary's words, on the true crown earned by serving the people. They had reached the heart of their heritage, not just to claim what was theirs, but to understand what it meant to be a true guardian of Eldoria. The faint light entering through the passage barely illuminated the interior, but Alaric felt the imposing presence of the room, the promise of a future that began there, in that forgotten place. Elian tugged at Alaric's hand with urgency. "Grandpa, come, it's so big, and the chest. It's made of dark wood with shiny metal fittings and a lion carved on the lid, just like our crest." The boy's voice was a mixture of awe and excitement, and Alaric felt an involuntary smile appear on his lips. The lion, always the lion. That symbol of his lineage, which now revealed itself to be far older and nobler than he had ever imagined. Guided by Elian, Alaric advanced, his steps echoing in the crypt silence. The baby, still asleep in his lap, seemed oblivious to the moment's magnitude, a small flame of life amidst centuries of history. When Alaric reached the chest, he extended his free hand, feeling the cold wood and sturdy metal fittings. He felt the texture of the carved lion, the crown on its head, the sword in its paw. It was unmistakable. "It's our crest, Elian, the same one that's in the diary and on the fireplace." The chest was heavy, seemed sealed for ages. Alaric slid his fingers along the edges, searching for a clasp, a mechanism. "There's a padlock, Grandpa, right in the center, in the lion's mouth," Elian described, his voice a little softer now, as if fearing to break the spell. "But it's rusted and looks old. I don't think there's a key." Alaric tried to force it, but the metal wouldn't yield. Frustration, for a brief moment, threatened to cloud his mind. So close, yet so far. "Wait, Grandpa, there's something here, on the side." Elian pointed to a small indentation in the wood, almost hidden by the darkness. It looks like a tiny button, very small, but it's shaped like a star. Alaric felt the spot, his fingers finding the small star. He pressed it. A soft click, almost inaudible, broke the silence. The chest lid opened slowly, with a creak that sounded like a sigh of relief from a long-kept secret. A soft, ancient golden light emanated from within, illuminating Elian's awestruck face. "Grandpa, it's gold and jewels. It shines so brightly." The boy's exclamation was pure, childlike joy. Alaric felt the warmth of the glow, even without seeing it, and the smell of ancient metal and precious stones. But there was more. "What else do you see, Elian? Is there anything beyond the gold?" Elian leaned in, his eyes wide. "There's a crown, Grandpa. It's small but beautiful, with blue and red stones, and a scepter, with a little lion on the tip, and many rolled parchments tied with silk ribbons." The boy's voice trembled with emotion. Alaric reached out and, guided by Elian, touched the crown. He felt the cold, worked metal, the cut stones. It was not an ostentatious crown, but one of simple, dignified beauty, like that of a just king. Next, he touched the scepter, feeling its balanced weight. The carved lion, a symbol of authority and protection. Finally, his fingers brushed against the parchments. He picked one up, feeling the texture of the ancient paper, the smell of faded ink. "The parchments, Elian. Read them. They must contain more of our history, more of the truth," Alaric urged, his voice choked with emotion. He felt the weight of that treasure, not just the material, but the weight of history, of responsibility. The crown, the scepter. They were not just symbols of power, but of a greater purpose, of a legacy to be honored. Elian unrolled the first parchment carefully. It says, "To the true heirs of Eldoria, may justice and compassion guide your steps. May the eternal flame burn in your hearts and light the path of your people. These are the records of our lineage, the maps of our lands, and the laws that govern our kingdom. May they serve as a beacon in times of darkness and an anchor in times of storm." Alaric closed his eyes, warm tears streaming down his face. The words of his ancestor, Alaric the Just, echoed in his soul, confirming the diary's message. The true wealth was not in the shining gold, but in the wisdom, justice, and responsibility that those objects represented. They were not just heirs to a treasure, they were heirs to an ideal. The baby in his lap whimpered softly, as if sensing the moment's energy. Life, hope, justice. Everything was there, in that chest, waiting to be rediscovered and lived. Alaric and his grandson's journey was just beginning, and the treasure was only the first step to restoring not only his family's honor, but the soul of a forgotten kingdom. They had found more than gold. They had found their destiny. A reverent silence filled the crypt, broken only by the baby's soft breathing and the rustle of the parchment in Elian's hands. Alaric opened his blind eyes, but now saw with a clarity that went beyond sight. He felt the weight of the crown and scepter he had touched, not as objects of power, but as symbols of a calling. The expulsion from his lands, the blindness, his grandson's illness. Everything now seemed a test, a forge for his spirit, preparing him for this moment. "Elian, my brave one, what else do these parchments tell us?" Alaric asked, his voice now firm, tinged with a new authority. "Is there more about the eternal flame? About what we must do?" Elian, still marveling at the gleam of gold and jewels, but understanding the seriousness of his grandfather's words, unrolled another parchment. This one looked more like a map, with intricate drawings and symbols the boy didn't fully understand. "Grandpa, this one has many drawings of lands and rivers, and there's a castle, very much like ours, but without ruins, and a shining star above it, like the one on the chest's button, and there's more writing, but it's different. It looks like a list of names and dates." Alaric reached out, and Elian carefully placed the parchment in his fingers. Alaric felt the texture of the paper, the raised lines of ink, trying to imagine what his grandson described. "These are the records of our lineage, my son, the kings and queens who came before us, and perhaps the maps of our lands, of Eldoria." The name Eldoria sounded different now, not just a distant kingdom in stories, but the land of his blood, of his purpose. The promise to protect the boys was no longer just a matter of survival, but of restoring a legacy, of fulfilling an ancestral oath. "And what else, Ilian? Is there anything about the people, about how we should act?" Alaric insisted, his heart pounding with a mixture of hope and responsibility. Ilian sought another parchment, one that seemed to have been handled many times. "This one, Grandpa, speaks of the laws of compassion. It says that a true ruler must listen to the heart of his people, protect the weak, and ensure that justice is like the spring water, pure and accessible to all, and that the eternal flame is the faith and hope that must never be extinguished, even in the greatest darknesses." Alaric felt a lump in his throat. The words were a balm for his wounded soul, but also an immense burden. He had failed to protect his family and his people in the past, being expelled and humiliated. Now, the opportunity for redemption was before him, but the path would be arduous. He squeezed Elian's hand, a gesture of gratitude and unity. "Elian, my little king, you are my eyes now. Both of us, and your brother, are the guardians of this eternal flame. It will not be easy, but with the wisdom of our ancestors and the strength of our love, we will restore Eldoria. Not just the castle, but the spirit of justice and compassion it represents." The boy nodded, his eyes fixed on his grandfather, understanding the magnitude of the task that awaited them. The darkness of the crypt no longer seemed so frightening. It was merely a portal to a future they would have to build, step by step, with courage and faith. Alaric felt a new kind of strength, not that of material power, but of truth and purpose. They had a destiny to fulfill, and he was ready to lead, even in blindness, guided by the light of his grandson and the eternal flame that now burned in his chest. Alaric felt the weight of the crown and scepter in his hands, objects that moments before were merely symbols of a distant history, but now pulsed with the life of a renewed purpose. Elian's words about the laws of compassion and the eternal flame resonated in his mind like a bell, calling him to a responsibility he, in his blindness and misfortune, never thought he would have again. He had been Lord Alaric, the respected, before the tragedy. Afterward, just a blind, exiled widower, a burden to his grandsons. But the truth revealed in those parchments, the royal blood flowing in the boy's veins and the promise of redemption for Eldoria, transformed his pain into an unwavering strength. An iron determination took hold of his heart, dispelling the shadows of doubt and despair that had accompanied him for so long. "Elian," Alaric began, his voice hoarse with emotion but firm, "we are not just the guardians of these treasures, my son. We are the guardians of a promise, the promise of justice, of compassion. How can we bring this light back to our people who have suffered so much under the darkness of injustice?" He squeezed the boy's hand, feeling the small, sweaty palm, a vital link between them. Elian, with the crown and scepter shining softly in the faint light, looked at his grandfather with a seriousness that went beyond his young age, his childlike eyes, yet full of hope, fixed on the objects. "Grandpa, the diary said the people of Eldoria still remember the crowned lion. Perhaps if we see the people and show them the crown, they will believe us," the boy suggested, his voice a whisper of courage. Alaric pondered. The idea of presenting himself to the people, a blind man with two boys, with a crown and scepter found in a forgotten crypt, seemed like madness, an invitation to mockery. He would be ridiculed, perhaps even imprisoned for usurpation. But the eternal flame, The faith and hope the parchments described would not allow him to retreat. He felt the baby stir gently in his lap, a vivid reminder of the life he had saved, of the life he needed to protect and honor with every fiber of his being. "You are right, Elian. We need to show the truth. But not just the crown and scepter. We need to show that justice and compassion still live in Eldoria, that the eternal flame has not been extinguished in our hearts, nor in the hearts of our people." Alaric felt a warmth in his chest, a determination that dispelled any lingering doubt. He rose slowly, with the dignity of a king, the baby still secure, his other hand firmly in Elian's. "The first step is to leave this crypt. Then we need to find those who still remember Alaric the Just, those who still await a leader who serves the people and not just himself, a leader who understands the true meaning of the crown." Elian, with a sparkle in his eyes, picked up one of the smaller parchments, one that looked like a map. "Grandpa, this map shows the castle and the surrounding lands, and there's a marked path leading to a village nearby. Perhaps the people there remember our family, our history." The boy's voice was pure hope. Alaric felt the parchment in his hands, imagining the map Elian described. A village. "Yes, Elian. It's a good start. But first, we need to prepare ourselves. We cannot appear as beggars, however noble our hearts and lineage may be. We need clean clothes, food, resources, and above all, a well-thought-out plan." He paused, taking a deep breath of the crypt's damp air, smelling centuries of history. "The treasure we found here, it will give us the means to start anew. But true wealth is the faith we have in each other, the strength of our family, and the faith in our greater purpose." He knelt with difficulty and carefully placed the crown and scepter back into the chest, along with the parchments, covering them with some of the gold so they would be hidden yet accessible. "We will take only the essentials for now, Elian. The gold that will allow us to start anew, but with discretion and wisdom. The wisdom of the parchments that indeed will always be in our minds and hearts, guiding our every step." Elian nodded, his eyes fixed on the chest, understanding the gravity of the situation. "Grandpa, I will help with everything. I will be your eyes and your hands always." Alaric smiled, a smile that lit up his life-worn face, but now transfigured by hope. "I know you will, my little king. And together we will show Eldoria that hope never dies, that justice can be reborn." He felt Elian's hand squeeze his tightly, a silent pact of courage and love. The climax was not an explosive event, but the silent and profound acceptance of a grand destiny, the transformation of a broken man into a reborn leader, ready to face the world, guided by the light of his grandsons, and the eternal flame that now burned in his chest, stronger than ever. The journey to restore Eldoria began there, in the darkness of the crypt, with the promise of a new dawn for all. Alaric, with the baby still asleep in his lap and Elian's hand firmly in his, left the crypt behind, no longer a refuge of despair, but a portal to a future. The faint daylight filtering through the secret passage seemed brighter now, not because his eyes saw it, but because his heart felt it with renewed clarity. They carried with them not just a handful of gold, carefully wrapped in an old cloth, but the wisdom of the parchments and the strength of an unwavering purpose. Elian, his eyes still full of the treasure's gleam, but his voice laden with seriousness, helped his grandfather close the passage, the soft click of the star mechanism sealing the crypt's secret, but not its legacy. The first days were of arduous work, infused with hope. With the gold, Alaric instructed Elian to find an honest merchant in the nearest town, a man his son had trusted. Elian, with the courage of a small emissary, departed and returned with provisions, tools, and most importantly, the promise of help from loyal old servants. Upon learning that Lord Alaric was alive and with his grandsons, they felt the eternal flame rekindle in their own hearts. The castle, once a mausoleum of painful memories and ruins, began to come alive. Roofs were repaired, walls cleaned, and the cold air gave way to a homely, welcoming warmth, fueled by lit fireplaces. The baby Lysander thrived, his childlike laughter echoing through the corridors, a sound Alaric never thought he would have the joy of hearing there again. The true test, however, would come with the people. Following Elion's map, Alaric and the boys made their first visit to the neighboring village. Apprehension was palpable. How would they be received? A blind man and his grandsons, without the pomp and power he once possessed. But Alaric did not take the crown or scepter. He carried only the truth in his heart and the wisdom of the parchments in his mind. Upon their arrival, they were met with curious and suspicious glances. Some whispered about Alaric's misfortune, others about the folly of trying to revive a lost past. Alaric, however, was not intimidated. With Elion by his side, describing the villagers' faces and expressions, he addressed them with a calm and firm voice, carrying the weight of experience and the sincerity of a pure heart. "People of Eldoria," he began, and the kingdom's name, pronounced by him, sounded like an echo of better times and a forgotten promise. "I know many of you remember me and the sorrows that befell us, but I come today not to reclaim what was taken from me, but to offer what has always been yours, justice and compassion." He spoke of the laws of compassion, of the importance of listening to the weak, protecting the needy, and ensuring that justice was accessible to all. He presented himself not as a king, but as a servant, a guardian of the eternal flame. The villagers, initially skeptical, began to listen attentively. Alaric, guided by Elion, sat among them, listening to their grievances, their hopes and their fears. He offered help to rebuild damaged homes, promised that the castle's spring of healing waters would be accessible to all who needed it, and, most importantly, ensured that everyone's voice would be heard and respected. Simple gestures, yet laden with profound meaning. An elderly woman, her eyes moist with gratitude, reached out to touch Alaric's hand, a gesture he felt as an embrace of forgiveness and acceptance. A farmer, who had unjustly lost his lands, was met with the promise that justice would be done. Gradually, distrust gave way to hope. News of Alaric's generosity, his wisdom, and his unwavering commitment to the people's well-being began to spread like a gentle fire, warming hearts. It was not the gold that convinced them, but the man's soul, the eternal flame that burned in his chest and that he shared with everyone. Elion, seeing smiles appear on the villagers' faces, felt immense pride. He was his grandfather's eyes, and together they were weaving the first threads of a new tapestry for Eldoria. Alaric's honor was not restored by decree, but by the faith and love he awakened in the hearts of his people. The castle, the crypt, the treasure were merely the means. The true kingdom was in the people, and Alaric the Just was finally fulfilling his destiny. The eternal flame he shared with each villager was not a fire that consumed, but one that nourished. News of his wisdom and compassion spread rapidly, not only in the neighboring village, but throughout all the lands that once comprised Eldoria. Messengers, initially skeptical, returned with stories of a blind old man who saw further than any king with eyes, a man who spoke not of power, but of service, of a kingdom built on truth and goodness. Old servants and families who had suffered under the tyranny of the usurpers began to seek out the castle, not with fear, but with renewed hope. Alaric, with Elion by his side, transformed the castle into a center of justice and healing. The spring of healing waters which had saved Lysander became a symbol of rebirth, its blessed waters now flowing freely to all who sought them, healing not only bodies but also wounded spirits. Elian, with the curiosity and intelligence of a child, delved into the parchments, reading the ancient laws and history of Eldoria to his grandfather, who interpreted them with the wisdom of his years and the clarity of his heart. Together, they re-established a council of elders, not to rule, but to listen to the people, to ensure that the laws of compassion were applied with fairness and love. The castle, once in ruins, flourished. It was no longer a monument to loss, but a beacon of hope. The cold stones warmed with the heat of lit fireplaces and the murmur of voices, Lysander's laughter echoing like a constant melody of life. The gardens, once overgrown with weeds, were cultivated again, with everyone's help, producing food that was shared among the community. Alaric, guided by Elian's steady steps, walked through the restored corridors, feeling the texture of the smooth walls, the aroma of fresh bread from the kitchen, the sound of happy voices. His blindness, once a curse, was now part of his strength, allowing him to see with his heart and mind, discerning the truth behind words. Lysander, the baby who had almost succumbed to fever, grew strong and healthy, a living testament to miracle and resilience. His bright eyes, full of innocence, were a constant reminder of the future Alaric and Elian were building. Elian, in turn, flourished under his grandfather's trust. He was no longer just Alaric's eyes, but also his voice at many moments, a young leader in the making, learning the art of governance with compassion and justice. He read the maps, organized resources, and above all, listened to the people's stories, bringing them to his grandfather with the seriousness of a future king. The crown and scepter, symbols of a power Alaric had rejected in favor of service, remained stored in the crypt, a silent reminder of the legacy, but not the source of his authority. Alaric's true crown was the faith of his people, the scepter, the justice he wielded with wisdom. Eldoria was not restored by an army or a treasure of gold, but by the strength of human connection, by the altruism of a man who, even in darkness, chose to be light. Alaric, sitting in his favorite armchair, near a softly crackling fireplace, felt Lysander's small hand on his wrinkled face, Elian's gentle touch, adjusting a blanket over his knees. He had fulfilled his promise. He had not only saved his grandsons, but restored the soul of a kingdom, proving that true wealth resides in compassion, justice, and the eternal flame that burns in every heart. The journey had been long and arduous, but the destiny was more glorious than any vision his eyes could have conceived. Eldoria, reborn, was a living testament to the hope that never dies. Alaric, sitting in his favorite armchair, felt Lysander's small hand on his wrinkled face, the warmth of life, the future he had fought to preserve. Elian's gentle touch, adjusting a blanket over his knees, was a reminder of the partnership that had guided them through the darkness. It was not just the restored castle, but the essence of Eldoria, a tapestry of lives intertwined by compassion and justice. The years that followed witnessed the seed planted in the crypt. The castle, now a vibrant community center, echoed with laughter, voices in council, and the melody of children playing in the blooming gardens. Lysander, the baby Alaric had held in despair, grew with the vitality of a young oak, his steady steps and clear voice filling the corridors, embodying reborn hope. Elian had become Alaric's right hand, his eyes and memory. With precocious wisdom, he read the ancient parchments, interpreted maps, and listened to the people's pleas with seriousness and empathy. He felt the weight of the words, learning to govern with his heart, guided by his grandfather's teachings. The laws of compassion were a way of life that Elian embodied in every decision, shaping him for the future. Alaric, though blind, saw Eldoria with clarity. He felt the prosperity in the murmurs of the fertile fields, in the warmth of the rebuilt homes, in the trust that permeated the voices of his people. His blindness, once a symbol of his fall, had become the emblem of his rise, proving that true leadership is not based on what one sees, but on what one feels and understands. He walked through the restored halls, guided by Elion's hand and the familiarity of every detail of the home. The eternal flame, a symbol of faith and hope, was no longer just a metaphor. It burned in the fireplaces of every home in Eldoria, in the bright eyes of children learning, in the hands of artisans, and in the hearts of villagers working together. Alaric had taught that true wealth was not in the gold of the treasure, but in the interconnectedness of their lives, in the strength of community, and in the belief in justice. The treasure, though it provided the means, was insignificant compared to the legacy of love and purpose. On an autumn afternoon, Alaric sat in the castle courtyard, Lysander nestled in his lap, Elion reading a parchment. The wind carried the scent of burning leaves and the distant sound of laughter. Alaric smiled with peace and gratitude. He had been exiled, humiliated, broken, but had found purpose and the essence of his family and kingdom. Elion placed his hand on his shoulder. "Grandpa, the greatest king does not conquer, but serves." Alaric nodded. "And the greatest treasure, my son, is the hope we plant in the hearts of others." Eldoria, a beacon of justice and compassion, prospered. It was not a kingdom of military power, but of moral strength, where every life mattered. The story of Alaric, the blind man who saw the truth, became a legend, an eternal reminder that the brightest light can emerge from the deepest darkness, guided by the eternal flame that burns in every soul. The promise was fulfilled, and the future, though uncertain, was filled with hope, forged in family love and the resilience of the people.